Hello everybody, how's it going today? Glowplasma231 here, back in data about Kagurabachi, chapter number 79. This chapter is titled Threat, with 2 exclamation marks, and I actually just did an outtake of this video, and it got so long and rambly, I decided to just go ahead and cut it out and just start a whole new recording. But pretty much, I think this is the first time that we have had, like, exclamation points, or any extra, like, a question mark, or any sort of, like, extra typeset sort of fonts. I'm not really fonts, symbols, I guess, on the Kagurabachi chapter title. Like, sort of going through, we've had, of course, like, commas, we've had apostrophes, what's it called, just periods in general, but, like, I don't think we've ever had, like, exclamation points like we get here with the chapter title of Threat. But I honestly just really love how this chapter is sort of portrayed, and really everything that we get in this chapter of Kagurabachi. Legitimately, going into this chapter, I honestly had no idea what to expect going into, because, of course, last chapter we got all of this great stuff with, like, okay, we're switching around to a few different perspectives in the general battle of, like, hey, here's everything currently going on in the Kagurabachi universe, right? Like, we saw the stuff of, like, hey, the Hishaku are sort of going out and retreating, we have Todo, Kogiri, and Hirohiko all getting away, and hey, there's 7 enemies attacking the general Kabanagi headquarters. It's like, oh, is that the 7 other Hishaku members? As we'll learn in this chapter, no, that's actually not the case. It seems like there's a few random riffraff sorcerers that we get here in this chapter, but honestly, these sorcerers are probably my favorite part of this chapter of Kagurabachi. Granted, this chapter of Kagurabachi has a lot of really cool stuff to it. But then we sort of move on to, like, okay, we have all the Chihiro and Samura stuff before moving in completely into everything in the Kabanagi headquarters, where it's like, hey, they're all trying to, there's this big attack to pretty much, there's a big attack front to go and get the Shinuchi blade along with, like, hey, we're going to get rid of the Sword Master, or whatever they're really planning to do with all of that. And the whole idea at the end of the last chapter is like, hey, one of the masked Kabunagi leaders going over to get Hakuri up. And I really love that the beginning of this chapter is simply just like we go through and learn a few names in this chapter. Like, this chapter is so good for that reason. It's like, hey, we're slowly building on to, like, okay, here's a few names of all of these various Kabunagi members and all of the things that they sort of go through and stand for. And also, like, general meaning for, like, other characters. I mean, hey, we learn Azami's surname in this chapter. And also just, like, Azami has an incredibly cool, like, epithet or, like, title along with it. Like, there's just honestly so much to talk about in this Kagurabachi chapter, and to really go through and talk about all of that, what else are we going to do but just go and, like, start the chapter view? I think I already talked about what happened last time on Kagurabachi enough a second ago, but I guess just to go ahead and just go through it again, we got the whole retreat of, like, hey, Hirohiko's not doing too good, Todo and Kogiri get him out of the Kyoto Bloodshed Hotel. We learned what Kogiri's actual sorcery power is. It's a power called Twilight Wave, where it pretty much stores up a bunch of energy in his power and it unleashes it all sort of at once, along with the whole ideas of, like, hey, Chihiro and Samura are getting ready to do all these things, and Chihiro pretty much just wants to make sure that Samura stays around for his daughter's sake, and not really to be this, like, super evil guy going to kill all of the other sword bearers and all of that various stuff, right? And then, like I mentioned, hey, at the Kabanagi headquarters, all of the various Hishaku guys are going through and getting ready to go through, and hey, we're going to get the Shinuchi back from the Kabanagi headquarters, and that's just what we are doing, pretty much, right? The end of last chapter was with the masked Kabanagi guy, and as we'll pretty much learn here in a second, his name is Kudo. We'll see that he comes over, gets Hakuri up, and it's like, hey, they're getting ready to do some stuff, right? But as I mentioned, that is exactly where we start off this chapter of Kagurabachi, with Hakuri pretty much going like, oh, hey, how can I help, sir? And the guy's just like, oh, hey, take it easy, like, hey, first, let me introduce myself. My name is Kudo. And I just love Hakuri for the fact of, like, he's like, hey, Mr. Kudo, how can I help you out, right? And the guy's just like, and Kudo's like, hey, just take it easy, like, there's nothing to do here. And I also just love this guy in Kudo, and recently I've been on a podcast. The first episode is now up. It is called the Kabanagi Headquarters podcast, so go check that out on podcasting platforms. I may have a link down in the description down below, but it's me and a few other Kagurabachi YouTubers and our people just talking about this great old series. And we recently had a debate on one of the episodes. I don't know if that episode's been posted yet. I honestly don't remember where it happened, but I'm trying to get all these episodes edited and uploaded for everybody to pretty much listen to. But pretty much, this is a guy who I think is a big traitor into Kabanagi. Like, he just seems like so shady and just so out of it. Like, he's going over here to get Hirohiko up. I legitimately just think this guy is evil. That's my opinion, at least, right? But pretty much, we see that Kudo pretty much just says, like, alright, calm down, take it easy, and Hakuri, let's assess the situation here, right? And he's like, hey, as the broadcast started, it seems like there's an enemy attack going on around here, and Hakuri's like, oh, like, is it the Hishaku? Like, that's not very good, right? But Kudo just is like, hey, more than likely, but Chihiro Rokuhira is detaining Samura at the moment. And we sort of see Hakuri's just like, like Chihiro, right? And like, I really just love how like we get a very detailed panel of his eye here as he sort of goes through and thinks about this, right? But Kudo just says like, hey, and if they're here, the Hishaku's targets are the Shinichi and the Sword Master, pretty much, right? And Kudo just says like, hey, if they get their hands on both, it'll be the end of this country, right? Because like, hey, but hopefully it won't come to that. That's where you come in, Hakuri. Like, hey, here's how you can help. And I love how we just get a panel of Hakuri like staring into the camera and really just staring into Kudo here at the same moment. As Kudo just says like, hey, we want you to teleport to Shinichi, right? While you are unconscious, we resealed the Shinichi, and it's in a similar state to before the Rakuzachi, right? And he's like, hey, if we can completely isolate it in a subspace, the Shaku will have no way of getting it, right? And Hakuri's like, oh, so you want me to store it in the warehouse, pretty much, right? But Kudo pretty much explains like, hey, when you overuse your sorcery at the, of course, the Senkotsuji Temple, you are hanging on by a thread and your access to the storehouse very much dwindled. And we barely managed to save it by transplanting a portion of your nervous system that governs the So and your other sorcery, right? And Hakuri's like, so, like, what do you mean by that, Mr. Kudo? As Kudo just explains like, hey, Hakuri, it means that your sorcery is still alive, but you've lost a little bit of both abilities, both your Iso and your storehouse. And Hakuri's like, so you're pretty much just saying, like, they're limited in, like, their maximum capacity. And Kudo's like, yeah, I mean, that's a very simple way to put it, but it is, like, a very efficient way to also explain, like, hey, we won't really know what the limits of your powers are currently until we do a general test run, right? It just is like, hey, it was only possible to pretty much save your sorcery because of your unusual constitution allowing two types of sorceries, pretty much, right? Like, hey, if you overdo it again, you could be completely lose. And if you overdo it again, you could completely lose both of your sorceries, right? And I really love this moment of it really reminds me to My Hero Academia and a bunch of the moments there whenever Deku is like, hey, I need to be able to use my arms to be able to use One for All and all of that various stuff, right? And then just a moment where he goes against Muscular and, hey, he uses what he pretty much calls 100% at the time, and eventually it's just like, hey, the doctors tell him, hey, Deku, if you use your arms anymore, you have a chance of completely ruining them, and then you'll never be able to be a hero again. And of course, that's whenever Deku sort of branches out into using shoot style and all of his pretty much like leg and foot-based attacks instead, and also like just his fingers for like air blast bullets and all that stuff, which is not really relying on his arms. And I really like how we get that same idea for Hakuri. Like, hey, you can overdo it once, but there will be completely serious happenings if you do it like this again. If you can overuse it once, but Hakuri, please don't do it again, pretty much, right? But Kudo then just continues on saying like, hey, and honestly, it was our fault for putting you in that position right after the battle with the Rakuzachi, pretty much. And Hakuri's like, honestly, no, it wasn't at all. Like, I appreciate what you did, and I can still be useful. Please take me to the Shinichi, right? As we even see that in this moment, Hakuri just thinks over to like Aruha's body, just mangled and crumpled on the ground, of course, after Samura sort of became that big betrayer. And, I mean, we honestly don't know how Hakuri's feeling in the moment, but we have to understand, like, hey, he went through, he summoned Tomimune for Samura, and that led down the path they're currently on, pretty much, right? Like, what would have happened if instead of, like, if he summoned Uruha's Enchanted Blade instead? Like, it's just one of those things, like, okay, I find this a little bit of an interesting sort of twist in everything going on here, right? But that's pretty much where we end off this scene, as Kudo just is like, hey, but let's take it easy every way. And Hakuri's like, no, but the enemy's here. But Kudo's like, hey, don't you realize where we are? As it looks like that they are on a deep lower level of the Kabunagi headquarters in general, right? But we then sort of cut over up top to the west entrance underground level 1 of the Kabunagi headquarters, right? As this is the point 5 pages in where we get the chapter title of this chapter, chapter 79, titled Threat, with 2 exclamation points, right? But walking through and sort of entering a door here at the end, of course, it's like those elevator-style doors that we often see in the Kabunagi headquarters. I just really love the design aspect that we get here. we pretty much see a few different people walk in, right? We mainly see one Hishaku member, and as we'll sort of see later, he's a Hishaku member really clad in a bunch of samurai-esque armor, along with two other sorcerers who we will pretty much learn about here later in a few pages, right? But we see they're all just sort of talking to each other, saying like, hey, this is the Kabunagi headquarters, right? And like, hey, if they let us infiltrate so easily and there isn't a single person around to ambush us, they've sure got some important stuff stashed around here while they leave themselves so open, right? And one guy's like, hey, it must be a trap. Like, hey, they can't scare us with their traps. Like, let's just keep on going, right? As we see these guys are just going through and really bantering with each other as they're sort of walking through the empty hallways of the headquarters here, right? Well, we didn't cut over to pretty much what seems like a data information, like a data analyst sort of room sort of deal, right? As you just see a bunch of different members of the Kabunagi all sitting down and really just like typing things into their keyboard, going and like sorting out papers in filing cabinets and all of this other various stuff, right? As we really get focused on a random higher up member of the Kabunagi here in a moment, right? As we don't really learn this guy's name, but really we just sort of get his whole mindset here in a moment, right? As this guy's just like, hey, I've worked at the Kabunagi headquarters underground west entrance for 18 years. Ever since the Kabunagi's inception, I have been the commander of this zone. Like, hey, before the Kabunagi, there was the counter-sorcery army, and during the Seitai War, the Kabunagi was created as an emergency response to the threat of sorcerers from Shokoku. And it's like, hey, originally it adopted the army's ranking system. It is discontinued now, but a person's former rank tells you a lot about their abilities. And he's like, hey, back then I was second lieutenant. In other words, I have significant martial experience, pretty much, right? As we just see, like, hey, the general army ranking system, we have all the general officers, the field officers, the junior officers, warrant officers, and all of that various stuff. Like, hey, lieutenant general, major general, colonel, or colonel, lieutenant colonel, major, captain, first lieutenant, second lieutenant. So we see that this guy was really, what is that? He was like 9 ranks down, pretty much, but like, still, he was pretty high up there, all things considered, right? And he just says, like, hey, and everybody stationed on this level does. We're prepared to deal with an emergency attack. However, as he just sort of thinks to a few minutes ago, whenever sort of like, hey, the sensory sorcerer guy who pretty much is like, has controlling the force field and all this stuff around here, they sent up a lantern to this area, of course, the west entrance, and it just is like, hey, we have seen enemies with elite fighting abilities. They are believed to be the Hishaku. Their 3 attackers are coming your way. Repeat, code mouse, code mouse. As this commander just thinks like, hey, when an enemy infiltrates the facility, he can sense their threat level. Code mouse means that our forces here aren't sufficient, pretty much, right? As pretty much he just remembers to the sensory guy earlier, just saying like, hey, we're centering counter forces up to underground level 1 central area, as pretty much this commander just thinks like, hey, in other words, our mission is to direct the enemy towards the central area without engaging them in combat, right? And just thinks like, hey, this is all to avoid unnecessary casualties, right? As he looks down to a old like CRT television monitor sitting on his desk, as we see these 3 sorcerers who just entered the headquarters and of course are in the West District, are all sort of just like walking from door to door through all these corridors, right? As we see this commander just thinks like, hey, one of them is clearly Hishaku, he has the emblem on his hand, but the other 2, as you sort of just get to look at them, as he just thinks like, hey, wait a second. As we get a little bit of narration here in a moment, as it just says, oh, the commander was horrified for good reason. Toshaku were accompanied by the Shigyu brothers, right? As we see these 2 brothers, they're sort of like brothers in sorcery pretty much, sort of walking through here, and we see that one of them is just like, oh, hey, don't worry, you Hishaku, you all don't need to pay us, pretty much, right? And the other one just says like, hey, we don't give a damn about the Shinichi or the Sword Master as long as we get to rampage, right? As we pretty much just, like, get a little bit of an explanation, like, hey, these 2 come from an ordinary family, and yet they once butchered 11 Kabunagi officers. And yet they once butchered 11 Kabunagi, including officers, right? As we just see the commander just thinks like, hey, maybe not all of the Hishaku are fighters, but well, these 2 would have more than made up for it. Like, hey, right now our presence is hidden by the force field built into our general grid, so as long as we don't make a sound or emit hostile energy, they really won't sense us, right? And it's like, hey, we can avoid a battle. as we see this commander just sort of looks down to his desk here in a moment, right? As we see there's a framed picture of somebody sitting on it, right? As narration just explains, like, hey, this commander was flooded by a wave of repulsion for good reason. His nephew was among the 11 who were slaughtered, right? As pretty much we just see a little bit of a flashback where this nephew just comes over and says, like, hey, I want to be a great man like you, uncle, right? It's like, hey, starting today, I'm finally into Kabunagi. I can devote my life to protecting this nation too, right? But of course, we know where the story ends with this kid here. Is like, yes, he met a very, very unfortunate fate. As we just see that the commander just thinks like, hey, yes, our job is to protect a nation. I can't expose my troop to danger based on my personal feelings. So, of course, this guy has a vendetta against the Shigyu brothers here in the moment, right? But he just thinks like, hey, focus on commanding. And he sort of just thinks like, hey, I can do this. He sort of like just puts both his hands right up to his nose, almost like he's getting ready to pray for something, right? But either way, we sort of just get a better look at the guys. He's just, as one of the Shigyu brothers, the older one, or not the older one, the taller one, sort of says like, hey, oh, look at that, they're here. As pretty much the commander's like, oh, don't tell me. Did he pick up on all of that, like, very subtle energy, pretty much, right? As we just see that the other Shigyu brother just says like, hey, seriously? Your detection abilities are insane, brother, right? As the guy says like, 23, no, 24 of them are around here. And the shorter brother's just like, hey, should we go and pretty much lay waste to them, right? And we see the Hishaku member, the samurai armor-clad guy's just like, yes, do as you please, pretty much. He's like, hey, I don't care, do whatever you want to, right? As we see the west entrance commander just thinks like, oh no, like how on earth, despite all of our force field, he detected our exact numbers, like gosh, now we really have to engage with all of them, right? But we see the taller Shigyu brother just say like, oh no, they're all pitiful insects. They're not worth our time. Let's keep going. As we just see the commander just thinks like, oh, what is that? He's like, I just felt relief here in that moment, right? As we just see that, of course, the taller Shigyu brother just says like, hey, oh, how pathetic. Come on, Kabunagi headquarters. I hope you'll offer us some decent entertainment around here. As we just see the commander just thinks like, hey, my nephew's murderer just spared my life. As that's where we cut away from this scene. As we then cut over to the central area of the Kabunagi headquarters, underground level 1. As we see the 3 assassins are pretty much going through and approaching this area. As we see there's a lady member of the Kabunagi who just is like, hey, as of now the 3 enemies have entered our territory, but the other 4 have not entered down here yet, right? As we see somebody walking up, and we see this is none other than Azami. As Azami's just like, oh, hey, thanks for the report. Hey, no gloves, don't hand them to me. I'll do this bare-handed. As we sort of walk into an area, as we see that Azami walks into this general area himself. As we see, there's this big central area, so you just get more of an explanation, like, hey, Kabunagi headquarters, central area, underground level 1, the threat elimination grounds. As we see, of course, the 3 eliminators, of course, the Shigyu brother and the samurai-clad Hishaku member are all here in this room. As Azami pretty much walks in, and we see there's a bunch of, like, speakers and a bunch of guys going up. One guy has a shamisen in his hand, and there's a bunch of other drums. And we see a bunch of these guys just start to play the music here in a moment. Strumming the shamisen, going through, beating on the drums, and the speakers are just going through and, like, pumping up the music here in the moment, right? As we just get a little bit of an explanation. For Soshiro Azami, the Executioner, and in the counter-sorcery land forces, he rose to the rank of colonel at the tender age of 18. As we see, the 2 Shigyu brothers are like, oh, hey, what a racket, is this supposed to be intimidating to us as all the drums are beating here in a moment? And we just see that the taller Shigyu brother just says like, oh, finally somebody worth our while. I know this guy. He's good. As you pretty much see that the taller one sort of uses a sorcery ability called Yellow Chains, and pretty much goes through and tries to bind Azami in all these chains here in a moment, right? And we see that Azami sort of gets caught by them. It's like he's caught in these chains, like both his arms are sort of like stuck together right next to his main body. Or next to his torso, I should say. As we pretty much see that he's getting here, and of course, the pretty much more brutish, shorter Shigyu brother sort of goes through and almost like looks like he's using some like metallic or like rock type spikes here in a moment, and it seems like he's pretty much like conjuring them out of nowhere to go through and attack Azami, as all of these attacks are just going through him, and as Azami is just bandaged here and like bound together here in a moment, right? As we get a little bit of narration, it just says, the executioner was livid. He'd questioned Chihiro in depth about the incident 3 years ago, as we just see that Azami really isn't paying attention to the Shigyu brothers at all. He's really just paying attention to the two the Hishaku member in the back area. As, of course, remember all the way back to the very first chapter, or well, it was either first or second chapter of Kagurabachi, where we got that whole idea of like, hey, 3 members of the Hishaku came in and raided and destroyed Rokuhira's hideout pretty much in a matter of minutes, pretty much. And as we'll learn here in a second, it was really a matter of seconds, right? As we just remember that we saw, of course, the Hat Shaku, we saw the female Hishaku member, and we also saw just the legs of somebody who had some samurai attire on. And of course, we'll get the idea that this is the same guy. As all of a sudden, Azami breaks out of the chains, and simply enough, punches the taller member of the Shigyu brothers right in the face and knocks him straight into the ground, pretty much, right? As pretty much, we just see the members on the drums and the shamisen amp up their playing, just get ready to play it more and even more here in a moment. As you see the other Shigyu brothers like, oh no, big brother, right? As we also get more narration just saying like, hey, Azami's fighting style is assault and battery. The enemy's small attack tricks don't work against sheer power. As you see Azami just comes through and punches the other brother straight into the ground. And we see that the samurai Hishaku guy just sort of looks and just is like, oh, look at that. Sort of like acting very nonchalant. These two guys have pretty much been murdered right in front of him, but like he's not paying any attention whatsoever, right? As you pretty much see, like he just got his hands sort of like stroking his chin here in a moment, like, oh, what is this, pretty much, right? As Azami just looks over to this guy and just thinks like, oh, he's Hishaku, probably one of the few responsible for Rokuhira's attack. When Shiba detected the attack, he arrived in just under 10 seconds. But the Hishaku finished her job within that brief moment. The 3 Hishaku who killed Rokuhira were the best of the best. These 2 losers don't even compare. As we see Azami go through, clench his fist, there's blood clearly on it. As we look over to both of the members of the Shigyu brothers, one, his head is pretty much completely exploded, his body's laying in a wall, and the other one is pretty much laying here on the ground with a very big divot mark around where Azami punched him into it, right? As Azami just thinks of something, or he just says like, hey, the rule of the threat elimination grounds is that the threats die here. As Azami pretty much looks over and just is like, oh, so we finally meet. Of course, talking about our Hishaku member here in this moment. As the final image of the chapter, as we just cut over to see both Kudo and Hakuri running throughout all of the halls. And of course, Kudo's like, hey, Hakuri, calm down. And that is where we end this insane chapter of Kagurabachi. Oh, this chapter is absolutely insane. I really love the whole build-up to the whole idea of like, okay, hey, we're getting through here, getting a little bit of these things of Hakuri and Kudo, going back and forth, seeing how these two are really going through and interacting. And then the whole idea of the threat. We see these Hishaku members sort of coming through and walking through the general area. We see like, hey, this commander of the west entrance of the Kabanaki headquarters coming through here, and he's pretty much going through and doing his general thing. Like, he's sort of realizing like, oh, we learned that he's got a connection to the Shigyu brothers, who are of course these sort of like hired sorcerers that the Hishaku are sort of using here in the moment. Until, of course, we learn this relationship, and of course, this guy's like feeling relief because he's been spared by the Shigyu brothers. Until we eventually just see, hey, the threat elimination grounds, Azami is here, and hey, what is his goal? Nobody leaves the elimination grounds. The threat dies here, pretty much. And I just love this moment as we just see Azami really not even paying attention to the Shigyu brothers, really just paying attention to the samurai Hishaku member here in the background. Is like, hey, he killed Rokuhira. I have a vendetta against Rokuhira, is one of my best friends in life. I am going to take this guy down. And, oh gosh, I don't think he's going to do it. legitimately, I think we're going to be getting a chapter where these two are facing off next time. We learn this samurai guy's name, or we don't even learn his name pretty much, but he just overwhelms Azami. Azami puts up a really good fight, but it's just not able to do anything. And maybe Azami is barely able to stay alive, and Hakuri and Kudo have sort of move over to pretty much bring Summer and Chihiro here to, like, heal up Azami or something, but I don't think Azami is making it out of it. I don't think Azami is winning this battle. I think Azami probably will make it out alive. He may be down, like, oh, he may have one less arm, or he's going to, like, lose both of his arms or something, so his assault and battery sorcery doesn't work as well. But I don't think Azami is winning this battle here, but such a good chapter of Kagurabachi. I love also the brief design of, like, the mask and the samurai helmet that the Hishaku member is wearing. It's just so absolutely cool, and hey, this series is going to be 80 chapters long next time, and I just can't wait to see how it works out. But again, great chapter of Kagurabachi. I absolutely love this one. I honestly just can't wait to see what we get next time, right? But of course, if you did enjoy this video on Kagurabachi chapter number 79, again, this chapter was titled Threat with 2 exclamation points. I do plenty of our Kagurabachi content here on the channel. There'll be a post link down in the description box on this video, and also a the post will be on the end card of this video too. And hey, if you like anime and manga related content, I do plenty of other stuff on the YouTube channel. Just go to @Glowplasma and find all the other random things I do there, pretty much, right? And of course, as I mentioned earlier in the video, I am one of the few hosts on the new podcast, the Kabanagi headquarters. Honestly, it's very funny that we started up this podcast, or the Kamunabi, I don't know, I think I say Kabanagi, but Kamunabi headquarters podcast. Very funny for the fact of, like, hey, we are currently in the Kabanagi headquarters here in a moment, and we just started up the podcast, but episode 1 is live now at the release of this video, and more episodes will, I think we filmed 3 episodes up to the point of when I'm recording this, and they will all get posted here shortly, and then we'll be doing weekly chapter reviews from that point on. But that, you also just search it up on YouTube at Kabanagi headquarters, and also should be up on a few podcasting platforms like Spotify. Don't think it's up on Apple Podcasts or any of those yet, but it's up on some of the cooler places. But yeah, really for all of that out of the way, thank you guys so very much for watching this video on Kagurabachi chapter number 79, and I'll catch you guys next time for Kagurabachi chapter number 80. Again, until next time, this will be Glowplasma 231, signing out.